That's what we did better than anybody else in the world. We told a really good story, you know. We're the worst at it now, as far as I'm concerned. A good majority of movies that come out, all right, you pretty much know everything you're going to see in the movie by the first 10 or 20 minutes. Now, that's not a story.
This is Quentin Tarantino in 1994, criticizing Hollywood storytelling and predictability.
A story is something that constantly unfolds. I'm not talking about like this quick left turn or a quick right turn or a big surprise. I'm talking about it unfolds.
It's something that is relevant to this day, and not just with Hollywood movies, but worldwide.
전작들에 대한 그 긴장감과 지금의 긴장감은 다르다.
And this is Hong-jin, the writer and director of some of the best South Korean movies like The Chaser and The Yellow Sea.
계속 느리게 전진해 나가면서 스릴을 강화를 시키는 이런 스타일의 영화를 만들고 싶었어요.
Talking about his approach to his 2016 masterpiece, The Wailing. Just from this short quote, you can see how the point Tarantino made can be a driving force for some directors. He builds his stories carefully, letting tension, ambiguity, and surprises unfold slowly so that every thread matters and every twist challenges the viewer's assumptions. After all, storytelling in film is one of the most important aspects, and that's what I want to explore. What does it mean for a story to unfold? And how does The Wailing do it? It remains one of the most talked about horror films nearly a decade later, thanks to its brilliant pacing, acting, and the countless ambiguities surrounding its ending. But instead of decoding symbols or explaining meanings, I want to focus on how masterful storytelling guides the audience, misdirects them, and constructs one of the most satisfying final acts of all time. Before jumping into the breakdown, let's talk about 4 major factors and techniques the director used to support the strengths of the story and manipulate the audience until the end. To make the analysis easier to follow, we first need to establish the basic structure of most narrative films. Stories usually begin in a stable, balanced environment. That balance is disrupted, creating conflict that needs to be resolved. By the end, the conflict is settled, and the new balance, though slightly altered, is restored. But not every film follows this pattern. Sometimes the story begins after the disruption has already happened, and sometimes balance is never restored, leaving the audience to complete the story themselves. The Wailing is unusual because it uses both of these approaches. It begins just as the killings start, and we are told that strange events had already been happening ever since the Japanese men arrived. In other words, we never see the balanced state at the beginning, and at the end, we never see a restored balance either. The film cuts off right before it, even tricking us for a moment into thinking the conflict has been resolved, but more on that later. The important thing for now is that Hong-jin bends storytelling conventions from the very first minutes. He does this to keep the tension up until the last moments and throw the audience off the trail of the film's central mystery. What is happening in this village? Narrative conventions such as story structure, genre, and character prototypes are essential for viewers to follow along and form their own hypotheses of what's to come. But for Hong-jin, the goal is to obscure these and challenge the audience. It's a balancing act, walking the line between a story that's comprehensible and one that feels impossible to solve. One of the ways he does this is bending and blending genres. While usually described as a horror film, it has elements from many genres and subgenres: police procedural, occult horror, psycho thriller, slapstick comedy, demonic possession or exorcism horror, zombie film, paranormal horror, folk horror, and the list goes on. The director not only bent the rules and subverted many tropes, he also blended Korean, Japanese, and Christian folklore into the mix, creating monsters and elements that are not what we are used to. By blurring the lines between genres, one of the most important frameworks that would help the viewer suffers. None of the expected tropes are helping. They make the mystery even more obscure. For example, while watching the film, it's hard to tell what the entities we see are and whether they even exist. Are the killers zombies, possessed people, or simply rabid humans? Zombies are empty. Their only urge is to eat, like we see Park when he's reanimated. But throughout the movie, the killers also remind us of the undead in the voodoo subgenre of horror, being controlled by another evil entity like shamans or warlocks to do their bidding, and when their task is done, they become empty shells. The rules and existence of spirits in this world are also not clearly defined.
헛귀신이라고. 헛귀신 중에서도 아주 악질의 사령이요, 사령.
This is partly because Japanese, Korean and Western folklore of ghosts, spirits and demons are all referenced at some point. And just like with the zombies, both we and the characters are left questioning the existence of the occult, as the film deliberately offers hints that can either rationalize the events as human actions
22번이나 꼬맸단 게 그래갖고 술 자시고 또 공부를 본 거 아니야?
or suggest a supernatural presence. This leads to the most important element in Hong-jin's approach to storytelling, the manipulation of the viewer. Narrative structure, style and genre all shape the viewer's perception and interpretation of a film. If we take some of the points on the topic from David Bordwell, we can note a few major rules. 1. The viewer's mind is actively trying to construct a coherent story while watching the film. 2. They make hypotheses based on what they see, dialogue, genre tropes, or their cultural knowledge. In other words, what kind of movies and literature they consume. 3. These theories are constantly popping up in their mind. Sometimes their hypothesis is right, but sometimes it needs to be adjusted or outright thrown away. And 4. Filmmakers play with this knowledge to encourage the viewers to create false hypotheses. He argues that narrative art ruthlessly exploits the tentative, probabilistic nature of mental activity. Filmmakers create expectations just to destroy them. They encourage us to make assumptions just to punish us in the end.
시방 하신 말씀이 진심이요?
Just like the characters, we are pushed into quick decisions in the pressing of time. And Hong-jin is a master of this. One of the questions that often come up in The Wailing is seeing and touching as proof.
아니 성님 시방 그 말을 믿어요?
검사 결과 나왔단 게?
직접 보셨어?
믿기지 않겠지만은 내 두 눈으로 다 직접 본 것이오.
어찌 산 사람이 귀신한 거인지 그거 이해가 잘.
와다시니 후레테미로.
All this is a metaphor for the film itself. The audience are in the same position as the characters who seek the truth and want proof. Do we know what we see is a dream, a vision, or an actual event? The director is constantly building on this, making us believe that something that we see was only a dream and something that was a dream actually happened, until we are not sure about what to believe.
꿈이야.
꿈 아니야.
Just think of how early he introduces these dreamlike visions. In the second scene, there's already an ambiguous event, which we find out is only a reconstruction of how the protagonist envisions the story he's told in the police station. But Hong-jin is not doing this simply to make the viewer confused. He's conditioning us all throughout the movie. He teaches us things about his world contained in the film, whether it's with editing, like the parallel montages, the confusing visions, or the characters themselves. It all builds us up to the finale, where we have to follow his pace using all he showed us before. The last element that constantly misdirects the viewer are the red herrings. The term red herring in storytelling is a misleading clue, especially in a detective story, intended to distract the reader from the real solution. It's been a necessary tool for building mystery for centuries, and exactly for this reason, many authors have used it to their advantage. We're conditioned to these stories because they've been around for so long. And bringing back David Bordwell's explanation, the viewer's mind is actively trying to fit familiar frameworks to the story they see. So even if you aren't familiar with the concept of a red herring, while watching a film you probably expect the most obvious suspect to be innocent in the end. Otherwise, finding out who the murderer is too early in a mystery could make it boring. But if the filmmaker knows the audience will engage with this assumption, they can subvert it by making the red herring someone much less obvious, or by not using a red herring at all. The American TV show Columbo does exactly this.
Just one more thing, please.
Instead of focusing on the classic whodunit, a trope that has shaped detective stories for centuries, it shows you the killer in the very first scene. So the mystery comes from watching the detective piece together the method of the crime and the motive behind it. Director Hong-jin, on the other hand, doesn't simply subvert. He misdirects us by making everything ambiguous. Take his 2008 thriller The Chaser. The serial killer is identified and detained very early in the film, and the story focuses instead on what happens after his arrest. A very unconventional move for a crime thriller. In The Wailing, the Japanese man is presented as the main suspect from the very start, an outsider who appears in the small town of Gokseong just as the murders begin. But because it seems so obvious, we eventually start to question it. Isn't this just the townspeople being xenophobic? All the stories we hear about him, and even the scenes where he appears as a demonic creature, devouring a deer in the forest or attacking a woman, seem more like exaggerated rumors or fevered visions than objective reality. The film builds on this tension and ambiguity, constantly balancing between making him look innocent and planting clues that suggest he really is the culprit. It gets even more confusing at the film's midpoint, when a shaman from the city, Il-gwang, arrives. He immediately reinforces the suspicion that the Japanese man must be the source of the evil.
누굴 건드려 붙냐고. 일본 사람.
For some viewers, this feels like a confirmation. For others, just another misdirection. Layered on top of this is the presence of the mysterious woman in white, Moomyong, whose very name means no name. As the director said in an interview, the movie is terrifying because the father is trying to protect his family from something he doesn't see. Strangers invade his castle, yet he doesn't know if they are allies or enemies. Along with the film's brilliantly edited parallel rituals, these competing forces pull the audience in opposite directions, building both tension and excitement to find resolution. By the time we reach the final act, we are just as lost, desperate, and conflicted as the protagonist, Jong-gu. And then comes what feels like an ending. The Japanese man is killed, Jong-gu's daughter, Hyojin, appears to recover. For a fleeting moment, it looks as if everything has been resolved. The balance is restored. After all the suffering, there's finally a glimmer of hope, a happy end. Until you realize that this resolution is an illusion, a red herring on the grandest scale. The story is far from over. There are still 30 minutes left, leading into one of the most brilliantly constructed final acts in cinema. All these elements I talked about so far condition and prepare the audience for what's to come. The film trains us to notice small details, to question what we see, and to anticipate hidden connections. So when the final act arrives, with its 30 minutes of parallel editing across 3 stories, the audience is ready to follow it. What makes the final act unique is that, instead of unfolding through several sequences, it plays out as a single extended sequence that intertwines 3 parallel storylines. The thread of Jong-gu, the father, Il-gwang, the shaman, and young Isam, the deacon. Until now, we've been left uncertain whether this world mirrors our own reality or hides something supernatural. But through these threads, the director finally unfolds the story, revealing more of the film's enigmatic world, while still layering twists and questions that stay with us long after the credits roll. I broke down the structure of the final act into individual scenes, marking each cut where the film jumps between the 3 storylines. For the sake of simplicity, I will call these 1, 2, and 3, with an additional 4th one which appears only for a minute and I will explain later. I marked the beginning of the final act at 1 hour 58 minutes, where we see the family back at the house, and the sequence ends at 2 hour 30 minutes when the credits roll. We can see Jong-gu's storyline is the most prominent. It makes up more than 62% or 20 minutes of the 32-minute final act, while the other 2 are almost equally distributed at around 19% or about 6 minutes each. But the way this sequence is edited makes this difference much less obvious, since the pacing is perfectly constructed. If you look at the distribution and rhythm of the scenes, it's clear why the sequence can keep up the suspense so well. The length of the individual scenes range from as short as 7-8 seconds to 3 minutes 45 seconds being the longest. But looking at each storyline separately, we see that storyline 1 averages 60 seconds, storyline 2 averages 1 minute 15 seconds, and storyline 3 averages only 30 seconds. Each fragment forces us to revise our assumptions or build entirely new ones, creating a relentless barrage that keeps our curiosity burning, leaving us uncertain of our choices and unsure of who, if anyone, we can trust. Jong-gu's thread is the central one, anchoring the sequence and asking questions to which the others respond.
그 외놈이 네 들어오길 기다리고 있어.
그 외놈 죽었어.
죽지 않았어.
They revolve around it, but in different ways. Il-gwang's thread intertwines with it, not only visiting the same locations at different points in the sequence, completely avoiding each other, but also speaking to Jong-gu on the phone twice. The deacon's thread, by contrast, is separated from the others both physically and emotive. Young Isam does not interact with either of the other characters, he seeks his own solution to the mystery, isolated in the mountains with the Japanese man, but it serves as a mirror to the interaction between Jong-gu and the woman in white. Both face unknown, mysterious entities who seem human and have physical bodies, yet the characters are terrified in their presence, sensing that something is off. We can even divide the final act according to the classic 3-act story structure, beginning with exposition, rising action in the middle, leading to the climax, and then falling into a resolution. Obviously, this simplifies things, but it still shows why the sequence works so well on its own. All the elements, symbols, and ideas we've been introduced to are poured into these scenes, serving as answers,
내가 덫을 쳐놨음께
callbacks,
그 귀신 본 적 있지? 그 목매달고 죽은 아줌니 집에서 봤자냐?
new interpretations, or new mysteries that further misdirect the audience. In the first few minutes, all 3 threads are introduced. Then, the balance is disrupted. In the first, Jong-goo's daughter Hyo-jin disappears. In the second, Il-gwang meets the woman in white and must escape. In the third, Yang Gi-sam receives a phone call that his uncle is also affected by the curse. Notice how each character faces unexpected situations that force them out of their comfort zone and into action. Jong-goo moves aimlessly, first searching for the shaman, then for his daughter, desperate and confused. Il-gwang is scheming, but his plans are blocked, so he moves out of fear to escape the power of Moon-young before returning to finish what he started. Finally, the deacon moves with determination. He wants to solve the mystery and uncover what happened, so he returns to the mountains, to the house of the Japanese man. This exposition of their storylines turns into the rising action, which complicates the plot once again. This part features the back and forth between storylines 1 and 3, the meetings with the mysterious entities that build tension and gradually confirm or challenge the hypotheses we've built up so far. In this section, the audience is just as confused as Jong-goo himself. We are manipulated from all 3 sides, and it's unclear who we can trust. Il-gwang is largely absent here because he has already sided against the woman in white, effectively representing the Japanese man's perspective. There's another element that strengthens the mirror between these 2 storylines. Moon-young tries to convince Jong-goo and earn his trust,
그놈 말 믿지 말어.
while the Japanese man flips this, asserting that no matter what he says, the deacon has already decided he is the devil. Both approaches work equally well at making the characters question their beliefs. Here's where the 4th perspective comes in. The mother and grandmother searching for Hyo-jin witness her arrival. I separate these 3 scenes because they all happen without the knowledge of the other characters, setting up the climax while heightening the suspense. The climax is reached at the same time. In the first one, Jong-goo sees the hairpin of Hyo-jin, another symbol introduced early on in the film, which shakes his trust and sends him running home. His actions lead to the demise of his family. The protective flower withers, and Hyo-jin herself is approaching to kill him. Meanwhile, in the third one, the Japanese man reveals his true form himself to the deacon. Opposites again. In one thread, Jong-goo interprets evidence and assumes what he sees is true, an assumption that proves false. In the other, the Japanese man confirms what was previously assumed, revealing the truth. This mirror not only reflects the characters' perspectives, but also engages the viewer, who is interpreting and guessing alongside them.
どうしてお前はおじまどるのだ?
Remember how I said touching or seeing as proof is a metaphor for the film itself? It's enough to read the quote from the Bible in the beginning. Is the director telling us in advance how he will actively challenge our assumptions? In fact, the viewer can step directly into the character's perspective. There's no better scene to prove this than the one in the cave. The deacon enters, finds the stranger alive, and immediately accuses him of evil. The conviction is already in his mind, as it always was. Only he understands Japanese and only he sees the stranger's true form, and he never leaves the cave. Now replace the deacon with the viewer. We're the ones entering, accusing, translating, and witnessing. We're the ones trapped. And after all, isn't it us he takes a photo of? He points his camera at the audience, at us, and takes the shot. All this is happening in our mind while watching the film, without us realizing it. We're not simply following the characters. The director orchestrates our assumptions, doubts, and fears, making the act of watching itself an intricate part of the film's suspense. After the climax, we reach the last part of the final act. The deacon's storyline is no longer followed. Instead, Il-gwang returns to show that he was an accomplice all along, just as the woman in white predicted. This is another callback to an earlier scene to show how the viewer's perspective changed. At first we thought he was afraid to enter because of the evil spirit, but here we find out he was cautious because of the Guardian. Meanwhile she is powerless and defeated, as heavy rain pours down on the town once again. An element that has appeared 5 other times in the film, always as ambiguous as the other symbols. Is it the protective, cleansing spell of a guardian spirit, or the sign of the 3-horned Oni hiding in his lair in the mountains, wielding the powers of thunder and lightning? The film concludes with the dying thoughts of Jong-gu, who slowly drifts into a dream that wakes him from this nightmare.
담담하건데 10년 이후에도 이런 류의 영화가 아마 나오지 않을까라는 생각이 드는데
With the protagonist and all the main characters seemingly dead, the story feels like it should end with an additional scene. But the director doesn't show us whether balance is restored, or if the killings will continue in the village. There's a deleted scene of an alternate ending in which the shaman and the Japanese man leave town together as the woman in white watches. In that version, it would be even clearer they work together and are done with Goksong. The original title Goksong translates to Wailing, but it's also the name of the town. The film focuses on this single village, only one stop in the long journey of the 2 shamans. This also explains why we never witnessed the true beginning or end of the story. It was never meant to show us anything but the townspeople struggle against an evil force and the guardian spirit who narrowly fails to defeat it. Cutting this scene doesn't leave us without answers. It gives the story power. The director wants us to decide what happens next. After giving us all the elements of the story, he lets us finish it the way we want. Whether the shamans are done with Goksong, or if the killings continue, whether the new balance is the victory of evil, or something else entirely. It's all up to the viewer to create one final hypothesis, to explain the terrifying and wonderful world of Hong-jin's Goksong, a film that remains among the most intricate and unforgettable pieces of storytelling in cinema. When I'm looking for something new to watch, something I know will be worth my time, curation really matters. This is what I love about Mubi, a hand-curated streaming service with a constantly evolving selection of films from all around the globe. Whether it's iconic directors or new emerging authors, there's always something to discover. As a fan of Japanese cinema, I finally had the chance to watch films from directors I'd always heard about but never had access to, like Shinji Somai. His 1993 coming-of-age film Moving is now streaming on Mubi almost globally. The film follows a 12-year-old girl whose parents are divorcing. Somai takes us deep into her world through long, carefully composed shots and stunning, colorful imagery. The vibrant costumes and thoughtful framing creates a rich, emotional portrait of adolescence. Moving is a perfect introduction to Somai's style, showing the beauty and chaos of growing up in 90s Japan through moments both tender and intense. If you want to watch movies I talk about, or just find new favorites from the curator's picks, you can try Mubi free for 30 days at mubi.com/justonemorething. That's mubi.com/justonemorething for a whole month of great cinema for free.